Think about burying a loved one because you believe them to be dead, but you later find out you were wrong. Imagine the realization that you have been purposely placed into a coffin and buried deep within the earth, alone in the dark. Chills of adrenaline course through your body, shaking you like a leaf as the reality of being buried alive sinks deeper and deeper into your mind. Slowly you begin to lose your sanity as you lose oxygen because your basic instinct has kicked in. Fight and survive at all costs. And that's what you do. You hit, claw, and tear at the walls around you in an attempt to escape from the hell you've been encased in.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining me on another night filled with tales of terror. Tonight, it's all about being buried alive, what led up to it, and the aftermath. So while you're listening to these stories, you may begin to wonder if what you're hearing is fact or fiction. And here's where I ask that you just hang on to the end of the video and we can all find out together which story was indeed a true tale of terror or not. So let's get this show on the road. Get comfortable. Click the like and subscribe buttons, please. I really do appreciate that. Turn down the lights and let's begin.
The story of Octavia Hatcher takes place in Pikeville, Kentucky in 1889. Young Octavia married successful businessman James Hatcher. Sadly, briefly into their marriage, tragedy would not strike once, not twice, but 3 times. In January of 1891, Octavia gave birth to a son she and James named Jacob. Their infant son Jacob died shortly after he was born, which was the case for many infants born during the 1800s. The loss of Jacob led Octavia into a debilitating depression that would soon claim her life. Springtime arrived with unusually hot weather as Octavia lay bedridden through the months that followed young Jacob's death. Her depression left her vulnerable to illness, which caused her to slip into a coma from which she would not awake. On May 2, 1891, Octavia was pronounced dead from the unknown causes. During this time, embalming was not a common practice, and due to the sweltering weather, they had to bury Octavia before decomposition set in, so funeral services were quickly conducted and Octavia was laid to rest. A fly known as the tsetse fly was the possible culprit of Octavia's demise. Soon after Octavia's burial, other people in the area began to exhibit the same symptoms as Octavia. Native to Africa, the tsetse fly is a blood-sucking fly. If affected, the tsetse fly transmits a parasite to its victims that can cause trypanosomiasis, a sleeping sickness that can lead to coma and death. Others afflicted with the sleeping sickness began to awaken after some time. This led James and his family to start to worry that this might have been what was wrong with Octavia. In her comatose state, her breathing may have been too shallow, leading doctors to believe she had died, and the truth was more horrific than they could have imagined. James had Octavia's coffin exhumed, and what he uncovered was both horrific and tragic. Octavia's coffin was not airtight, and while inside, she had awoken from her deep sleep only to find herself trapped beneath the earth. In utter panic, she tore at the lining of the lid of her coffin, shredding and blooding her fingernails and tips in her frenzied attempt at escape. Her face was filled with scratches, contorted and frozen in an expression of sheer terror. Octavia had been buried alive, but now she was dead. James buried Octavia and had a life-size statue of her erected over her grave. In February 2011, Harry and Tabitha Fowler lived in Davidson, North Carolina. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple. Tabitha was a stunning woman who could turn heads wherever she went. Harry was a hardworking attorney who aspired to become the next U.S. Senator for his state within the current election year. He was very busy and often traveled away from home. Overall, Harry and Tabitha had a good marriage, but she was easily bored and spent most of her time shopping or having lunch engagements with friends, where she complained consistently about her underwhelming marriage. Then one day while shopping, her favorite pastime, she met David Jenkins. David was a young man blessed with gorgeous looks and irresistible charm, and he knew it. When David looked at Tabitha, he saw opportunity and dollar signs. He strolled over to her and started a conversation, selling her on his personal training and physical therapy services. After some time, they exchanged numbers to set an appointment for him to come to her home and give her a private demonstration. When Harry called to check in with her that evening, she was cold and curt with him. This tone of hers was nothing new to him, though. The following day, David called and arranged an appointment with Tabitha for him to come over. Knowing Harry wouldn't be home until the next day, Tabitha had plans for David. Little did she know he had plans for her too. He showed up that day with a massage table in hand. He set the table up in her bedroom. Naked, she lay on the table and he began to massage her. Apparently, there was some sexual tension because his hands began to touch and caress places a man typically wouldn't touch on a woman unless invited to do so. His pleasure was so overwhelming, she drifted into a sleep when all was done. That evening, Harry came home and found David shoveling dirt over a wooden coffin on his property. But that wasn't all. Harry could hear Tabitha's muffled screams coming through the wooden coffin. David was burying Tabitha alive. Harry turned and went back into his house. David continued shoveling and patting down the dirt until Tabitha's grave was covered. Harry stood at his window watching David walking towards his house. He waited until David entered to make eye contact. Harry only smiled and handed David a case with $10 million. "Pleasure doing business with you, Senator," David said. "Likewise," said Harry. Then David strolled away, paid in full for a job well done. It was 1915 South Carolina, where Essie Dunbar suffered from epilepsy. Back then, there was not much knowledge on how to treat epilepsy or what it was that caused it. In truth, there were many misconceptions about epilepsy, leading to fear and discrimination of those suffering from the disease. When Essie was in her 30s, she suffered a traumatic epileptic attack that looked to be fatal. Essie seemed to have passed from the attack, so the doctors pronounced her dead and placed her body in a coffin. Perhaps it was fear of contagion that led to a quick burial for Essie, because they made quick arrangements for her to be buried the following day so that her sister, who lived outside of town, could make it to Essie's funeral and pay her last respects to her sister. Traveling to Essie's funeral took longer than expected, and when Essie's sister finally made it to the funeral, they were already covering the grave with final clods of dirt. This couldn't be. Essie's sister needed to see her one last time and say a proper goodbye. After some emotional demands, Essie's grave was exhumed. When they opened her casket, to everyone's shock and horror, Essie sat up alive and well. She went on to live for another 47 years. A butcher in 1661 Newgate Market, London, named Lawrence Cawthorne, had become terribly ill. So much so, the woman he was renting his apartment from began to anticipate his demise. She knew that with Lawrence Cawthorne's passing, she would inherit all of his belongings. On the day that it seemed Lawrence had succumbed to his illness, his landlady was very quick to declare him dead. Back then, seeing a doctor was not as common as it is today, and often it was left to someone with little medical background to pronounce a person as deceased. And that is what she did. With little sign of breath or a heartbeat, Lawrence Cawthorne's landlady hastily pronounced him dead and quickly had him buried at a nearby chapel before a doctor could come to examine him. While mourners were paying their respects to Lawrence, they were suddenly horrified by the sounds of muffled shrieks and frenzied clawing coming from inside Lawrence's already interred coffin. Swift action was taken to dig up the coffin that entombed Lawrence Cawthorne, but it was too late. When the coffin was finally unearthed and opened, all were mortified at the sight. Lawrence, now certainly deceased, lay there lifeless. His head was battered and bleeding from most likely banging it against the coffin in an attempt at escape or rescue. His eyes were grotesquely swelled and his shroud was ripped to shreds. It was said that Lawrence's landlady was accused of premature burial. A description of Lawrence Cawthorne's fate can be found in the 1661 pamphlet titled "The Most Lamentable and Deplorable Accident."
Okay, so what'd you think about this video? Did you figure out which story was an actual work of fiction? Well, if you guessed that it was Harry and Tabitha, you'd be correct, because they are characters in a story that I wrote for tonight's video. Regardless of whether these stories are true or not true, or sometimes somewhere in the middle, I really hope that you had a good time tonight listening to these spooky tales of terror. And before we go, I just want to ask you to please click the like and subscribe buttons, because it really helps me out a lot. And to prepare for more tales of terror delivered to you weekly at 3 a.m. So until then, stay safe and stay scary.